Hi, I'm Maria Mandarino, and thank you for being here today. Today we're going to talk about Enneagram Type 1, which is called the Perfectionist, sometimes called the Reformer, sometimes called the Improver. But before we jump into things today, if you haven't already, I'm going to ask you to subscribe to this channel, to like the video, to comment on the video. These things really help to build the algorithm for the channel. And please share the episode with somebody who you think might be interested in this information. So, as I mentioned, today we're going to talk about Type 1 in the Enneagram. The Perfectionist is the most common description. They are in the gut center or the body center out of the three centers of the Enneagram. And their main focus is about what is right and what is wrong, what is good and what is bad. Okay? Their focus is on what needs correction, what needs improvement. They are constantly comparing themselves to others, and their focus is always away from pleasure and fun, because first we have to make sure everything's perfect. And there's never time for fun, because in reality, nothing's ever perfect, right? So the focus is away from pleasure for Type 1. They care deeply about getting things right. They seek to escape blame or guilt. They have true anxiety around getting it right, which can cause them to procrastinate, because again, nothing is ever going to be perfect, right? So because of that, because Type 1 really is hung up on that, they tend to procrastinate and just keep working on perfecting what isn't right for them. They have a deep fear of criticism. They have a deep desire to be morally superior. And their driving emotion, and we're going to talk about this a little further, is anger and resentment. Okay. So some higher expressions of Type 1. This is when people are in their fullness of type, the healthiest expression of Type 1. They are responsible people. They make things better. It's not just that they're hung up on perfectionism, they truly do make things better. They're conscientious, they're self-controlled, they're hardworking, they're honest. They can be excellent supervisors because of all of these qualities. They're highly principled, they're focused on goals, they're accomplished, they're structured and organized. Their standards are high, they are self-reliant. They don't look beyond themselves for help. They get it done themselves. They're dedicated. They're sensible. They're fair. They're punctual. Time is one of the most important things with Enneagram Type 1s that I know. Time is being punctual is really important to them. They are highly ethical, logical, and they work with reason. They apply reason to projects, challenges. They will bring reason into those things. So when I say Type 1 is focused on what's right, when they come upon what's right, for them it's not a belief, it's a knowing, and it's a gut level, down to the bones knowing. And I say they know it in their bones when they're right. And that kind of sets them up for some struggles. All right. We're going to talk about some somatic stuff with Type 1, and that gets into this knowing, not thinking that they're right, but this knowing and how that affects them somatically. So one of the most important things to know about Type 1 is they have an inner critic. And we all have an inner critic, but Type 1's inner critic is on the loudspeaker all the time for them. And they have this sense that they have to prove their worthiness by being as perfect as possible to prove that they're worthy of someone's love and admiration. They can be very self-judging. They can also be very judging of others. We're going to talk about that in a moment. And as I said, it's about being right. It's about being good. Those are the two measures of worthiness for them: being right, being good. So this struggle within them creates a struggle for their self-esteem, and they can suffer from low self-esteem. They're also prone to being very tense. And again, we're going to talk about that in the somatics. They can also be very lonely people because of their need to be good and right and perfect. They can kind of push people away without even realizing they're doing that. And then there's this paralysis around action, that procrastination that comes about. And this is all centered around that lack of self-esteem that type 1 can have because of the inner critic that can kind of throw them out of balance and cause them to be unhealthy in their expression of type. Details can consume them. So the lower expressions of type 1 that come out of that situation of the inner critic being out of control for them, they can feel flawed. They can be opinionated. They are critical of themselves as well as others. They can be perceived as nitpicking. They are resentful of what's not right, okay? Because there's always that judgment. There's always something that's not right, and it can build up resentment in them. As I mentioned, self-judging, self-critical, defensive. They can make others feel that they'll never measure up. So if you're in a relationship with type 1, their expression of love for you is they want to make you better because they see your potential. They know you can do better than you're doing. So to other people, to the person receiving that feels like criticism. That feels like I'm never going to measure up for you. So hey, why bother? So they can make people feel that way, that they'll just never measure up. They have this inability out of all the types to relax and have fun. Because if you're having fun, that means you're not making things better. And again, this isn't a lower expression of type. This is an unhealthy one. Fun is a waste of time for them. Okay. And when we're in the panels, when we do our training in the Enneagram, often you'll ask a type 1, and it's not uncommon at all, and say, what do you do for fun? And they're like, who has fun? That's their answer. Why would you have fun? Why? You're supposed to be doing things, making them better. And, it's about work and improvement and fun. Maybe they would find those things fun, but just fun for the sake of relaxation. It's really, really hard for a type 1, especially someone who's not in the higher expression of the type. They can hoard their work in the workplace because the only way it's going to be done right is if I do it myself. That's how type 1 shows up, right? So they can hoard work. As I mentioned, the unmet potential of others is deeply distressing to them, particularly close family members. That's a tough one for them. They can be sarcastic and biting. They can be brittle, uptight, and unhappy. They can be kind of sour about life, and they're really sour because they just see the things that are wrong. So, and it's very hard for them to let go of what's right. So that inner critic, of what's not right. So that inner critic for them can be really, really harsh. And it can also make them feel very depressed and sad, and no one sees how the type 1 suffers. So that's another dimension of their struggle. They're struggling with that inner critic, and no one has a clue of what it's doing to the type 1, and that can really be hard for them too. So anger is not unique to any one type, even though as we go forward, some people might think that about certain types, and I'm not going to give those away yet. But every type feels anger. And as I tell people, there's just 9 ways to do it. because we have 9 types and there's 9 ways to experience anger. So type 1's anger, when they do feel angry about what's not right, they then immediately go into well, anger's bad. I shouldn't be angry. It's bad. So there's this other struggle that happens within them because they don't want to own their anger because they want to be good. So anger in type 1s can look a little different depending on how they present. It can be an explosive anger, and if it is, usually immediately after or relatively soon after, there's this feeling of remorse because anger, as I said, is bad. They shouldn't have gotten angry. It's not that higher ideal. They should have been more controlled. They should have not, flown off the handle, right? And they can have a short fuse. If they're explosive, it can be quick, shocking, and then usually there's this remorse of, oh man, I shouldn't have done that. That wasn't right. Or because they're so hung up on the anger not being right, they can just kind of stuff it down, and it's like this constant slow burn with them, and they just kind of swallow it down. And then the other expression of anger for type 1 is righteous anger, and those are, that's the positive expression, I would say, of anger. It's the anger that makes you do things for the right reasons to help people that need somebody who's going to kind of build up a head of steam and get things done. So righteous anger that drives social change, that can also be in the sphere of type 1. So type 1, as I said, is body type. So the somatic experience of anger for type 1 is mostly, it's not exclusively in the upper part of the body, but a lot of it's centered in the jaw, because there's the things that they'd like to say about what they don't approve of, what they don't think is good or right. And if they hold it down, they're going to hold it in their jaw. They can also hold it in their neck and their shoulders. For some of them, it's in the diaphragm, that holding, and it can go to the pelvic floor as well, as tightening up of the pelvic floor as they experience anger. And it's like an armoring. It's just like this body armor, and they just, once they tighten up, it's just there. It becomes their almost like a turtle shell for type 1. So when type 1s are separated from what I call their divinity, there's a silent suffering that goes on. They don't express it. But fundamentally, there's this feeling of feeling bad because they're not good enough. A fear of being rejected, or in the workplace, a fear of being fired for the person who's going to show up and do it better and take their job away from them. This is so this armoring that happens with them, it's all of this stuff that they're worried, concerned about, and hanging on to, because if they're not good, right, or perfect enough, everything can just come unglued for type 1, right? So as a result, they're unable to enjoy themselves and relax and have fun. That's why fun seems like a ridiculous thing for a type 1 to do, because there's important stuff that they're worried about, okay? And that's very real for them. So they have that constant pressure of the internal critic, which, like I said, it's on loudspeaker in their voice all the time, in their head all the time. But it has an armoring effect. So while it's the voice of the inner critic, there's also this physical thing that happens to type 1 that tightens them up. They become rigid and braced. And their greatest fear is that someone will come along, do it better, and take their place. So as a result, if you have a type 1 in your life, the best way to reach them if they're in that state is to say, I see you. I see you. I see how hard you work. I see how dedicated you are, how high your standards are, because you want to be better. You want to be the best. You want us to be the best. We see you. And we also know that no one else in this group could probably do it as well as you do it. And if anything's going to make a type 1 relax, it's probably going to be words like that. What you have to be careful of is you don't want to make it drippy. You don't want to be over the top. You want to make it short and direct and sincere. And if that type 1 is going to exhale, that's going to help them get there. And it's a tough thing, because if you're in a relationship with type 1 and you're feeling criticized or not valued or not seen, it's very hard to take that step back and express those words to them. But if you're struggling with a type 1, I'm going to ask you to give it a try. And if you are a type 1, I'm going to ask you to take a deep breath and ask yourself, who might see that in you? Who might see how hard you're working and maybe is afraid to say it, maybe feels less than, but they know that without you, we're not going to have those high ideals. We're not going to try to meet those standards, that we see your value. So I'm going to ask you to kind of step back and breathe with that. If you lead with 1 and if you're in a lower expression of 1, and at one point or another, trust me, we are all we are all in the low expression of our type at one point or another. So that's a given. So that's a quick view of Enneagram Type 1, the Perfectionist. If you lead with 1, or you know someone who's close to you who leads with 1, I'd love to hear your comments about how you felt about the content in today's episode. Next episode, we're going to talk about the 3rd body type, which is Enneagram Type 8. So we'll cover that next time. I do want to put out a brief word about compassion, because the reason the Enneagram matters is it teaches us how to be compassionate, first of all, to ourselves, how to see where we struggle, where our flaws are, where we need help from others, where we need to redirect our own intent, and again, to just be compassionate toward ourselves and toward others, how we deliver parts of our type to others and how that might be perceived by others who are meeting us with usually a different type. And what that all means. So I just want to mention that the Enneagram is really here to teach us compassion. And that stems from awareness. So the Enneagram brings us to greater awareness about our type structure, the higher expressions and the lower expressions of those type structures. And if you haven't worked with somebody on the Enneagram and you'd like to, I do offer consults, and I do Enneagram testing, which is different from, there are many Enneagram tests online and written tests, and I just want to say a brief word about those as well. They can be highly effective, but they can also trick us. So for me, working with someone as I was learning my own Enneagram type or discovering my own type, it was really essential to sit with someone who could reflect back and basically trip me on the things that I wanted to go around and kind of reframe in a polite way, and answer a question in such a way that I went right around my type and I missed it. So I personally believe you can fake yourself out with the tests. So that's why I do think that working with an Enneagram professional is really important and powerful to do. So I do offer that work. You can find out more on my website. I'll put that in the show notes. It's mariamandarino.com. And there's a whole tab there for the Enneagram with plenty of information there if you'd like to learn more. Once again, please like, subscribe, comment, and share. It's so important. And thank you for being here, and I'll see you next time. I'm hoping to have an interview coming up soon with an Enneagram Type 9. I don't have one set up yet for an Enneagram Type 1, so if you are an Enneagram Type 1 and you would like to be interviewed for an episode coming up, that would be awesome. Please reach out to me and let me know, and we'll get you scheduled. And that's pretty much the rhythm of how I'd like to do this. With a little bit of a chat about each type, and then an interview where we kind of get into what it's like to live in each type, because I can only tell you I can only give you the descriptions of type and the analytical expression of what goes on within Enneagram types, but I can't tell you what it's like to live from any type other than the one that I lead with. So I think that's why it's important to be able to bring people on the show who can speak directly to the conflicts and the higher and lower expressions of each type. So that's all for today. Thank you again for being here. Remember to like, subscribe, and share, and I will see you next time. Bye.